The Duce is no longer loose. He is a USC Trojan, of course, and we will talk further on that front. The Arizona tight end headed toward USC, most likely. More to explain there, of course, conflicting career aspirations, possibly. And of course, the spring game is a couple weeks away. We will start to discuss and preview what we could see out of USC in the spring game very soon. We got Matt Zemek on the line, of course, from Trojans Wire. Please join him right there on Trojans Wire. And this is our 47th edition of USC Trojans Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Hey, Matt, how are you?
All right, so basketball season ended. That means it's football season, right? That's how it goes, right?
Hey, that's how it goes. And we're glad to have you fully focused, even though a Matt Zemek who is focused on like 18 different things at the same time is still good enough. No question about that. Australian Open till 4 o'clock in the morning. He still delivers here talking football, the NCAA tournament and conference tournaments before that for 5 or 6 weeks. Still delivers here, but it's nice to have a hopefully refreshed Matt Zemek here with us.
Absolutely. Getting a little more sleep in the offseason, because I know that when we get to week 0 and against San Jose State in late August, like it's going to be all systems go through early January. So yeah, definitely kind of filling up the fuel tank here at the Voice of College Football. So, the big story in USC land, pretty obvious. Duce Robinson, as you alluded to. And so USC, some people might get wrapped up in this. I don't, but like a lot of people say, oh, vaulted past Oregon for number 1 class in the Pac-12, but it's one spot. So like no one should be either rejoicing or losing sleep over that, either in LA or Eugene. But I think the main point, having a top 10 class, number 8, is just recruiting's solid. Like, I wouldn't say spectacular. Like, you're not up there with Dabo and Kirby and Saban, but it's good. Like, this is certainly a lot better than the Clay Helton reign of error. And with Duce Robinson, the obvious question is, if he goes in a particularly high slot in this summer's MLB draft, is he going to bail on USC? And so Lincoln Riley thinks, Lincoln Riley's pretty convinced that Duce Robinson will suit up for USC. And, one thing to keep in mind here is that Lincoln Riley's been through this with Kyler Murray, considering a baseball future with the Oakland Athletics. So Riley is no stranger. He's no newcomer to these kinds of conversations and these considerations. And so that he went over this with Duce Robinson and his family. So that's obviously something really important to keep in mind in terms of weighing whether Duce Robinson is just going to pursue professional baseball or try and carry a 2-sport load at USC. This is kind of a sidebar thing, but it's still worth noting. USC baseball, which has been really bad, it's good this year. And maybe that played a small but real role in just getting Duce Robinson's attention and bringing him to USC instead of Georgia. USC just hired a new head baseball coach, Andy Stankiewicz, and he's been, use the appropriate metaphor, hitting it out of the park in his first season with the Trojans. So maybe that just offered a little extra push. We don't know, but as I wrote over the weekend, it certainly didn't hurt. It certainly wasn't a negative factor. So, we'll see about the baseball side and how that goes. But now turning to the field, and the two things that naturally popped into my mind when, Duce Robinson committed to USC, and I wrote about them at Trojans Wire over the weekend. First off, Lincoln Riley might have his USC version of Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews was on the 2017 Oklahoma team that had an elite offense, lost to Georgia in that classic Rose Bowl playoff semifinal, scored 45 points. Like, the offense didn't lose that game for sure. It's the best offense that Lincoln Riley had at Oklahoma. Mark Andrews was a part of it. Lincoln Riley certainly prepared Mark Andrews well for the NFL. He's had a brilliant pro career with the Ravens. And so Lincoln Riley now has a high level tool at tight end that can be his next Mark Andrews. That's one thought that entered my mind. The other main thought is putting a field stretching tight end in the hands of a brilliant play designer and play caller. And when's the last time we really had this in major college football? I would say Florida in 2020 with Dan Mullen working with Kyle Pitts in that loaded Florida offense, scored 46 points against a Nick Saban defense in the SEC championship game. I mean, you look at that Alabama 52, Florida 46 in the 2020 SEC title game. I mean, that's a Lincoln Riley, Alex Grinch game right there. Like, that's basically the Cotton Bowl. Basically what we saw a lot at USC over the years. And so, hey, USC, let's be real. USC is probably going to have to win at least one, if not two, 52-46 style games this season if it really wants to get where it wants to go, which is the college football playoff. So Duce Robinson, in the hands of Lincoln Riley. So Lincoln Riley gets to design plays for this dynamic, extra special talent at tight end. And of course, technically a tight end, but it's essentially another wide receiver, but, with a bigger body, with bigger frame, can have specific uses in terms of, winning battles, and Lincoln Riley putting him in position where you get him on a smaller defender and he's just going to play basketball. He's going to box out the smaller defender. I mean, Lincoln Riley, like Dan Mullen with Kyle Pitts, like you give an elite play caller the ability to use that kind of body on downfield routes and in downfield pass schemes. That is just a unique weapon, and you give it to a guy who is great at maximizing the effect, maximizing the value of a high-end weapon. Like, that would be wasted on a David Shaw offense, but it's certainly not going to be wasted in a Lincoln Riley offense. So the Mark Andrews element, Lincoln Riley gets a next elite tight end, and just on a broader level, an elite tight end who basically doubles as a wide receiver in the hands of a genius play designer. Two huge sources of upside for USC football.
Well, I have not heard the name Andy Stankiewicz for a long, long time, and did not know that he was the head coach at USC. But if it's the Andy Stankiewicz I know from Yankee fame as a utility infielder, he certainly wasn't knocking him out of the park then. He was squibbing him through the infield. But yeah, he knocks this one out of the park. Now back to the football theme. What comes to mind for me generally when we're talking elite recruits and commits is the obvious win is just the procurement of the talent of that particular player on your side rather than having to face him or him going across the country somewhere. The number two factor would be the impact that it could have on other recruits, just the optics of it, being able to land a big fish, and then who knows what that direct impact is in terms of his buddies, but also just the look of it, the optics, and the impression that it places on other recruits that, hey, this is the place to be.
This is the place to be. And also, a two-sport athlete. Like, I think there's something there because, you'll find players that, are gifted in multiple sports and like, hey, where's a program where I can fit in? Where's a program where my skills and my pro future can go in multiple paths and I can be taken care of really well? I mean, this augments USC's standing, USC's position as a program, which can deal with that and do it well, do it right, and provide a really good home for those kinds of athletes. And linking back to Kyler Murray and what Lincoln Riley did at Oklahoma and guiding Kyler through his own two-sport future. So if Duce Robinson and his family were sold on Lincoln Riley's vision, so when the next time this comes along, you have a two-sport star choosing between USC and Ohio State, USC and Georgia, USC and Alabama, like, this is going to give Lincoln Riley a foot in the door for the next time something like this comes across. So it really does give USC, significant leverage, and plus, of course, the splash of publicity. So it really does work in a lot of different directions. It works on different levels, and I think that's the thing. Like, you mentioned, like, you have the talent procurement, but then this can have a ripple effect in so many different ways in so many other different areas. And I think just that multi-pronged aspect to all this, like that's something you really love to have as a program, as a head coach, that you can recruit guys in a lot of different situations and contexts, and you can present yourself as, hey, I'm the mix master. I'm the guy who can, take care of these different combinations, these different situations and contingencies. I can make the pieces of the puzzle fit. And Lincoln Riley has certainly earned that reputation. But now here's the cautionary note. Lincoln Riley has earned that reputation on offense, not yet on defense. And that really is the other part of this, is that Lincoln Riley's landed the number one tight end. He's landed the number one wide receiver, and he has the number one quarterback in the country, Caleb Williams, defending Heisman winner. Where are the number ones on the defensive side? So again, it reinforces this larger reality. One side of the ball is figured out. Like, we do not have to worry too much about this. The other side, or actually the other two sides, when you also include special teams in the mix. And it's just like the offensive piece of the puzzle is so fully grasped by Lincoln Riley. Like, there's no real weakness. I mean, you can do some really fine nitpicking on the margins, on the edges, but there's no gaping big fundamental weakness or flaw in Lincoln Riley's larger architecture. Like, that Trojan horse is not going to be exploited by the Greeks. It's all about the defense and partly about the special teams. So it just kind of, as great as this is, and it's great, like USC fans, it's great. It's wonderful. Not selling it short, but can we get to this standard on defense? Then you'll have a Saban, Kirby-like monster that's ready to just park itself at the very top of the mountain on a consistent basis. So it does highlight the imbalances that are still lingering for USC football.
Part of me hates to go here, but we certainly want to make everyone aware. So one of our good friends passed away today, Golden Blue Dude. So I'm going to go live at 10 o'clock Eastern time tonight, just to reminisce, just to honor him. And also there's a GoFundMe for an extremely good cause there. So there's a post on Twitter that explains it a little bit more, and I will as well. But we're going to go live on the main channel at 10 p.m. Eastern time tonight to pay honor to Chris, Golden Blue Dude. So please join us there, and we'll be taking calls and comments and questions and so forth. All right, Matt, we've got a spring game coming up here on April 15th.
Yep. 15th. Saturday, April 15th.
Yes. So it really gets going here. So hope you were able, all of you, to join us this past Saturday. We went live with a Michigan watch party because Michigan pretty much had center stage and the only stage on April 1st. There's not a whole lot going on in regards to the major programs this Saturday. Auburn, NC State, we will certainly tackle those spring games coming up this weekend. And then the floodgates open on April 15th. And for the next 3 weekends, the final 3 of April, yes, there will be all sorts of spring games across college football that we will do our best to track and present to you our coverage, USC on the 15th. So any preliminary thoughts there, Matt, in regards to what's going to be important to be watching?
Well, one of the bigger picture reminders about USC football this season. And by the way, let me get in my promo for Trojan Conquest Live with Tim Prangley and Rick Anaya. They're doing an excellent job on their Sunday show, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. You want to watch Tim and Rick every Sunday evening on Trojan Conquest Live. But, one of the things that I've talked about with Tim and Rick on Sundays the past few weeks is that, because USC has a backloaded schedule, nothing that should be particularly threatening until the Notre Dame game on October 14th. Then you go, Notre Dame, Utah, Washington, Oregon, 4 huge games in a 5-week span. That's going to determine the course of the season. But, in from late August through early October, no game should be particularly threatening to USC. So, the Trojans have several weeks ostensibly to settle into a groove, find the lineup combinations that work, get a lot of different guys reps. And so, for a lot of teams and for a lot of fan bases, the obvious offseason talking point is who's going to be the starter on day one? Who's going to be the starter opening week? And for USC, because of the schedule, because of everything that's going on this season, it's really not about who's starting against San Jose State. And then week 2, who's starting against Nevada. Like those simply are not important season changing, equation shaping considerations. It's who's the starter against Notre Dame on October 14th. That's really, when the season becomes really serious. And so USC is going to have several weeks within the course of the 2023 season to find the starters, to find who are the men, the guys who, really deserve to be at the top of the depth chart, and to get that starting assignment and will be depended on to carry the bulk of the workload. So it's not really important who's starting against San Jose State in late August. It just isn't. But with that in mind, so setting the table for the spring game, it begins. The jostling, the competition for spaces and spots on the depth chart, who makes the early statement. Now, whoever makes the early statement in the spring game, like August camp could change the equation. The summer could change the equation. The transfer portal window in May could change the equation if USC lands, a Jordan Addison level big fish as it did last May, but on the defensive side of the ball. Let's say USC gets an elite edge rusher in May. That'll obviously change things. So whoever wins in the spring game or, plays well in the spring game shouldn't be assumed as like a lock to be that day one starter, but it is the beginning of the race, or at least it's the intensifying of that race. And I think among all the different positions that one can imagine, I think the most intrigue-filled battle is, can Tackett Curtis, the freshman from Louisiana, like he's getting more buzz than any other USC freshman. I mean, you could point to other ones, but to me, I think Tackett Curtis seems to be that special case. Like in our chat, I get to see our chats here at the Voice of College Football as we do our shows with you, and also on Trojan Conquest Live with Tim and Rick. And Tackett Curtis is the name which keeps coming up. And more specifically, a lot of USC fans say, should we give him number 55? Should we give him the Junior Seau, Chris Claiborne treatment? And like when you see that kind of discussion, like that there's something special there. That there's a special level of buzz, a special level of anticipation. And so, the linebacker room at USC, it's in the best shape of the various defensive position units. So it's relative to the D-line and the secondary, not overall, but like relative to the other position groups, linebacker is definitely in the best shape. You have Mason Cobb coming over from Oklahoma State in the transfer portal. He's going to be a day one starter, pretty certain of that. But then for the other positions, can Tackett Curtis muscle his way in? Can he make that much of an impression as a freshman? I don't offer any. I mean, my one prediction I just made it was that Mason Cobb's going to be a starter. Like, you don't have to worry about that. That's done. That's locked in. As long as he's healthy, he's going to be a day one starter. But can Tackett Curtis, really shoot to the top line on the depth chart in the linebacker room, or is it going to be a process? Is it going to be a wait and see thing? Is he going to need several weeks to establish himself? That to me is really the most interesting part of the spring game. Can Tackett Curtis, how much of an instant impact does he make on the field, when we see him in live action? Because if he's the real deal, if he's living up to this kind of hype, to this kind of buzz, wow, what a stabilizing force that would be for this defense. And of course, what is priority number one for the USC defense in 2023? Tackling. And so Mason Cobb's going to lock it down. If you get Tackett Curtis in there as another, stone cold lock tackler, if the guy's within shouting distance, he's going to bring him down. then you know that you're going to have a significantly better USC defense with a lot more upside, and that's how the equation changes positively for this program in 2023.
Folks, check out the portion of the show that you missed. So what you need to do is just obviously watch the entire show after we get done here on the live stream, because it's all posted and ready to roll. So if you jumped in 15 or 20 minutes late, no fear, you can catch what you missed. And to Tim's point down below, Lincoln Riley made the comment this week that he's extremely impressed with the development of the secondary, and so that's good news to USC fans for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the secondary does appear to be better, but Tim and others, like, I think that if you had to judge each position group and you had to say which group is in the best shape right now, I would certainly put the linebackers a notch ahead of the secondary. And the other thing that has to be kept in mind here is that if the linebackers are doing their job as tacklers, I know Mark, when you've talked about Bryson Shaw's tackling stats, like, that's kind of been one of our touchstone subjects here on the Voice of College Football. You've been great at mentioning and reminding your viewers that if your secondary is racking up tackles, that's not necessarily a good thing. The linebackers need to be cleaning things up in that middle level. And so, if in terms of balancing the secondary versus the linebackers, I think like the linebackers have more of a role in making the secondary look good. And I think so. If you're going to say the secondary looks really good at USC, well, that means that the linebackers are in a position to make the secondary look good. I think there's more of a causality in that direction rather than in the other direction. So I would definitely say that the linebackers are in a better position than the secondary. So that's not to say that the secondary isn't improved. All right. It doesn't mean that. But I do think the linebackers overall, the linebacker room is in a better spot than the secondary. You could argue that, like, Dumani Jackson being injured last season, we didn't get to see what the secondary was capable of, and that if you get Dumani Jackson in healthy for a full season, maybe the secondary, is immediately day one, game one, game two, maybe it's going to rise to the forefront. Certainly possible, but I just think that you have reliable tacklers at the linebacker level, and that just is the most immediate way in which the USC defense looks better on paper compared to 2022.
So there's a question coming in here from Gerardo, who's making a comment here about saying kudos to Mike Bohn for bringing top coaches across all sports. Question: can you speak to Bohn's influence on the direction of the defense, or is it all Lincoln Riley? By the way, Carroll did not get all number one recruits. I think we're all aware of it. There's only so many number one recruits at their positions. So that's just, Matt was just speaking in generalities, of course.
So Gerardo, I think that, first off, I think Tim Prangley is a little bit more bullish on the USC defense as a whole than I am. I'm a little bit more in a wait and see mode. I know that Tim on Trojan Conquest Live on Sundays, he's been talking about how guys are bigger, they're thicker, that they're stronger, they've bulked up, they're getting some real muscle, packing on some real fortifications there. And empirically, just in terms of a physical observation of the guys that you see on the practice field walking out of the tunnel, physically, the guys are more developed, but that doesn't automatically translate to improved performance, improved tackling, and everything. So I'm a little bit more cautious. I'm in a little bit more of a wait and see mode. So, has Lincoln Riley changed the defense? So first of all, we don't know just how much the defense has changed. I don't want to assign progress, or at least too much of it, until it really becomes earned and it really becomes impossible to ignore on the field. So that's going to be a talking point heading into the spring game on April 15th. But in terms of if there is a Bohn versus Riley influence, and if there's a tension point there, I mean, Lincoln Riley, by deciding to retain Alex Grinch, just right there, ipso facto, to use a turn of phrase uttered by Trojan men centuries ago. Just the fact that Riley has retained Grinch, that is itself a statement of influence in terms of wanting the defense to be coached a certain way, because Lincoln Riley could have gone in a very different direction, but no, he wanted the continuity of Grinch, and he wanted to do something that, Tim has also mentioned on Trojan Conquest Live, which is, just have a natural carryover from year 1 to year 2. Have a chance to learn the same system, become more familiar with it, soak up the nuances in year 2 in a second off season that you really didn't get a chance to do in year 1. That a 2-year transition, a 2-year program, I should say, you get a chance to absorb knowledge and retain it more fully. And then, that's a valid reason to keep your defensive coordinator, right? That guys, who were being taught in a certain way 1 year, let's get another year of teaching in that same mold, in that same style, with some improvements, hopefully. But, maybe guys will absorb nuances that will put them in a better position to finish off tackles, to exhibit better technique, to, finish off the plays that were not made late last season in November, early December, and then in the Cotton Bowl. So the influence is Lincoln Riley, if only because he wanted continuity. He wanted Alex Grinch to stick around. He wanted a carryover effect, guys staying within a certain structure, a certain framework, soaking up knowledge within the same confines, with the same constraints and the same environment. That is a value statement. That is a statement of philosophy of what Lincoln Riley wanted. So just that speaks to his influence. And we can say whether it's good or bad, separate discussion, but it is Lincoln Riley's influence to be sure, Gerardo.
Now, we can certainly pick up more on this train of thought involving position breakdowns and all of that as we approach the spring game. But until we get those comments and questions in the chat, I'd like to take this in a different direction. And before we do, I'm going to let everyone know that starting with this week's show, we are going to not have those individual segments available to all of you. So in the past, we have edited the entire show down into topical segments, but we are going forward. Everything's still available, obviously, because the entire show is going to be posted, but we are going to timestamp all of those topics. So you will be able to, it eliminates me from carrying the burden of editing. If it was this one show, that would be fine. I would do that, but it's, multiply it by 12, plus all the records we do during the week. I found myself like on Friday editing like Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, and on down the line, like 6 different recordings that were not live streamed. So it's just as effective for us to keep just this live stream available to all of you, and the timestamps are going to be right in the description section. So if you want to go to a particular topic, you are still going to be able to do that. So just keep that in mind going forward. What I wanted to hit you with, Matt, is obviously at the end of last season, there was a hierarchy within the conference that was closer than probably any other conference in college football. It's just a tremendous race among the top 5 to 6 clubs in the conference. The straight out standings would tell you that USC had the best season at 8-1. Utah, of course, won the conference championship. And there were certain times in the season in which a case could have been made for, again, 5 teams being the best team in the Pac-12. So regardless of whatever you believe to be the hierarchy of the conference, throw the standings away, whatever Matt Zemek believed to be the best team, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and how close those slots were, which I would assume were rather close. Aside from Dorian Thompson-Robinson moving on from UCLA, have there been any other changes to these other teams at this point? And of course, we'll dissect this further and more in a granular form as we go through the summer and dissect the conference race that has you thinking that any of these teams are either substantially improved or have declined since last season.
I think the major non-USC story in Pac-12 football in the offseason is that Washington was able to retain Michael Penix and was able to retain its offensive staff. Like Washington has a lot of continuity heading into 2023. And so like if either the quarterback or the offensive coordinator or other high profile offensive pieces, if you take even one of them out of the mix on Montlake, Washington would have been significantly weaker. But I think Washington held together its pillars, its cornerstones, and so that retention is particularly important. All right, now Connor Johnson. I think a team in Oregon got a QB. Well, that QB Connor had the throwing yips the past few years at Clemson, and so we got to see if my line on DJ Uiagalelei is it's less that Jonathan Smith is gambling on DJ himself. Jonathan Smith is gambling on Jonathan Smith. Jonathan Smith is betting, I can fix DJ. I can fix the throwing yips. Jonathan Smith is betting on himself. And, well, given how well Jonathan Smith has done, why wouldn't you bet on yourself? So, like, hey, I'm all for it. It's a bold, aggressive move, but I don't think it guarantees Oregon State a place in the top tier. Like, Jonathan Smith has to prove he can fix the yips. That he can get DJ out of that Chuck Knobloch, Rick Ankiel, Steve Sachs hell cycle, and get rid of those throwing yips. If he can, okay, that is an equation changer, Connor. No doubt about it. But it's a pretty big if. Dabo couldn't fix it. Dabo could not get that thing fully corrected. He had to put in Cade Klubnik in the ACC championship game against North Carolina, and it turned out to be a really good move. Because DJ Uiagalelei's first throw in that ACC championship game against North Carolina, it was just a nosedive throw. Ball went straight into that Charlotte dirt, and Dabo could see, oh, this is not going to go very well if I keep DJ in the game. I have to put in my freshman. Worked out great. But so Jonathan Smith is taking a damaged quarterback. He hopes he can fix him. Maybe he can. And if you were to tell me, Connor, hey, don't bet against Jonathan Smith. He can do this. He can turn DJ Uiagalelei into an elite guy. Hey, Jonathan Smith is capable of it because Jonathan Smith definitely knows what he's doing. But if this is a player that Jonathan Smith can't fully transform, then the equation changes negatively in Corvallis. So I compare that in Corvallis and other situations in the Pac-12 to what I see on Montlake with Kalen DeBoer running it back with his staff, with Penix, with a fully loaded offense. That it's going to be hard for Washington, to really fall below fall out of the top tier in the Pac-12. And of course, that game with Oregon is in Seattle. It's in Husky Stadium. So if just right now, and the transfer portal window in May, that's going to create some more roster churn. So we don't need to be making final predictions here. But right now, if you ask me who's going to be in the Pac-12 championship game, I would lean toward USC and Washington. That would be my choice at the moment, but it's certainly subject to change.
HR picking stuff. Dan Lanning's defense looking scary. It did look scary last year, maybe in a different connotation than what you're bringing to the table there. HR. Our buddy D is here attacking me for my fake USC takes, which I don't know what I said about USC. I didn't even
say it if there's such a thing as a fake USC take, what's a real USC take?
Yeah, I don't know that I've even stated any opinion on anything tonight yet.
What about a vegan USC take? What are we doing here? What's the classification?
Absolutely. So yes, DJ Uiagalelei. I will say that he did throw 22 touchdowns and 7 picks last year versus the 9-10 ratio from the year before. But still, that's just a stat. He certainly wasn't a championship caliber quarterback either season. He was awful 2 years ago. He was serviceable most of the time last year. Matt Zemix here breaking down USC football. How about that, folks? We deliver USC talk here each Sunday and Monday night. The reason we're here Tuesday is we just figured, hey, national championship basketball on Monday night. Let's do it on Tuesday this week. But our regular time is Monday at 8 Eastern. And I'm sorry, that is tonight at 8 Eastern. Typically Monday at 11 Eastern and 8 Pacific with Matt, and join Matt on Trojans Wire. And Rick and Tim get together every Sunday night at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific to talk Trojans football and Trojan Conquest live right here at the Voice of College Football. All right. Let's see. Where are we going to go next with this? I'm trying to think what's been on the every storyline I can think across college football doesn't really involve the Pac-12, involving, scheduling formats and such as we go forward. But
I would say, Mark, that in terms of Pac-12 media rights, and like who knows when this is going to happen. Like John Wilner was saying, like George Kliavkoff needed to get this done in March. Well, March is over, so no deal. But in terms of how this looks, whenever it looks, I think one thing we can say now that we couldn't say with quite as much confidence 3 weeks ago: San Diego State will be a member of the Pac-12. I mean, I'm not going to say guaranteed, lock city, but like I can say with considerable confidence. Let's put it that way. Like it would be a surprise at this point if San Diego State is not a future Pac-12 member within the next few years. And I know that football is the ultimate revenue sport. College basketball isn't, but like if there was ever a time for a school to have a moment in the sun, a moment in the spotlight at the NCAA tournament, like San Diego State, boy, just an exquisite sense of timing with this run to the national championship game. And this should help admissions. It should help the academics. The enrollment piece of the puzzle that our friend Tony Altomore likes to talk about in his role as a consultant. So that it should certainly help from that angle. But then, the publicity, the positive buzz that San Diego State is deriving from this Final Four run, you would think that that's going to flow into football. And of course, San Diego State was proactive in getting an on-campus stadium built, an on-campus facility to itself, doesn't have to share a stadium with anyone else in San Diego. So like San Diego State has already taken some steps to kind of make its product more robust, more enticing to outside recruits, outside applicants. And so now you put in this run in the national championship game. Like if the Pac-12, if George Kliavkoff cannot bring San Diego State into the Pac-12, well, he should resign, and maybe we should just all pack up our bags in the Pac-12 and go home, and maybe just cease to exist. One would have to think that San Diego State dramatically raised its chances. Let's put it that way. Not an absolute stone cold lock, but like I'd say like we got to be in the high 80s, low 90s percentage likelihood that San Diego State is going to be a Pac-12 member before too long.
And I've got a couple points to play off that, but I'd like to read D's comment here first because they're always amusing. But he wants a prediction on the Pac-12. So first and foremost, of course, I don't give predictions until the last week of August generally. But if you want a prediction right now, yes, USC is going to go 2-7 in the Pac-12. D, absolutely. The defense is going to go from 124th in yards per play to 133rd. And that's going to be the difference between, that 8-1 and 2-7. There you go. All right. The couple indicators that don't seem to be going the Pac-12's way in this media rights deal, among many, and certainly folks dig in if you want my various takes on this. I've got a string of videos over on the main channel on all of this going down, and really capitalized on this to launch a series that we did this past week. I looked at the TV ratings for all the 5 conferences, and then I did a 6th video that kind of compared, and we took a deep dive. We were like going 50 deep on TV ratings, so check those out over on the main channel, folks. But, Matt, it's only common sense in negotiations that the longer it's drawn out, the entity, the party with the least leverage, continues to have the least leverage and becomes more and more in a vulnerable position. And not that the Pac 12 doesn't have a good football property, but the entities that they're dealing with, negotiating with, first of all, the sports entities have plenty of inventory. It'd be nice to add the Pac 12 for a late night game on Saturday night or a late night Thursday night, all these things. Yes, it would be nice, but they're not needed. They have plenty of football on Fox, plenty of football on ESPN. Okay, with some of the parties that they're dealing with that are not currently in the football game, whether that's Apple TV or Amazon outside of the one NFL game on Thursday night, they are not sports products currently. Now, it appears as though they are thinking seriously about getting into college football in particular, but they don't, that's not their business currently. They're doing just fine without them. They don't need the Pac 12. None of these parties need the Pac 12. The Pac 12 needs one or more of them.
Well, I said a few weeks ago here at the Voice of College Football that the Pac-12 will be served well by getting deals with multiple outlets because, when we look at what college sports on television and live streaming is going to look like in 2029, 2030, 6, 7 years from now, we're probably looking at a world in which Florida State and Clemson are in the SEC. I think that's where we're going. Like the drama that you've seen with the Florida State Board of Trustees, like you can tell that in Tallahassee and probably at other schools not currently in the SEC, but with robust national football brands, they want to eventually get to the SEC. And so we could see a world in like 6 or 7 years when, again, those grant of rights, exit fees, penalty fees aren't nearly as steep. Schools such as Florida State and Clemson will be willing to pay those lower numbers in terms of the exit and penalty fees to make a jump to the SEC. And so the landscape for television and streaming is going to be significantly different in 6 or 7 years. So it behooves the Pac-12, in my opinion, to have deals with multiple entities so that when you get to that next media rights round, in 6 or 7 years, you have established relationships, you have a foot in the door, you have a reliable relationship. So it's important for the Pac-12 to think of multiple deals instead of just one. But of course, that works in tension with, as you said, like you got to land the plane now. Like the plane can't stay in the air forever. You're eventually going to run out of gas. And so, in terms of arriving at a reasonable enough price point, like, is Kliavkoff trying to hold out for a moonshot? Is he trying to think that is he withholding the completion of a deal because he just so badly wants to match or exceed the figure Yormark brought in for the Big 12? Is he really holding out that long? And is that what's delaying this? Like in terms of percentages and also in terms of, like, a lot of people can relate to this next one. Like, do I cash out my bet now or do I try to win it all? And like, you're not going to win all your bets. And there's sometimes when, hey, just preserve your bankroll for the next bet, that might go more smoothly, in which the team that you bet on gets a good start, and you have the leverage and you're in a position to make more. This bet hasn't worked out. And you specifically, Mark, have mentioned, and this was the bet George Kliavkoff made. George Kliavkoff took the wait and see path. Let's see how all these moving parts and puzzle pieces look after several months, after other conferences get their turn at bat, and then I can jump in and really make an impact. That was the bet George Kliavkoff made, and it's turned out to have been the wrong bet. Not that George Kliavkoff was dumb, all right? This is just high-stakes poker, and sometimes in high-stakes poker, you get the wrong set of cards. It happens, but like now that, the bet hasn't worked out, the Kliavkoff does need to land the plane. I agree with you that the longer this drags on, it's not as though the Pac-12 is going to be gaining leverage. Now maybe with this little San Diego State mini boomlet because of the Final Four run, like maybe this is the time now. In 1 month, San Diego State's value, buzz, publicity going to be as great? Like if George Kliavkoff is baking San Diego State calculations into his equation, in terms of I have this product, I want to sell it with San Diego State in the mix. If you're going to do that, you do it this week, right? You do it now. You do it sooner rather than later. So, I do think that he needs to get this done quickly, if he's going to get a reasonable price point. But again, we just to kind of wrap this up here, if he's holding out to try and get the highest possible price point, like that just doesn't seem to fit right now, because is there an event just around the corner that's going to somehow max out the Pac-12 value and enable it to match or exceed your Marks figure? I'm just not seeing it. If you land the plane in at like 3 million, 4 million below the Big 12's figure, it's not great. It's not a home run. It's not a smashing success, but industry insiders would view that as, it could have been a hell of a lot worse. And George Kliavkoff needs to cash out his bet instead of getting taken to the cleaners and losing everything. Needs to cash out his bet, land the plane now.
Yeah, and you're right. It's easy to be critical when you're not the one having to pull the trigger and have to work through a high stakes negotiations by any stretch. It's easy for us to stand on the sideline and take pot shots. However, I do wonder, and maybe other things are involved, the wisdom of sitting back when your league just lost the number 2 market in the country and its best football brand and about its 5th best football brand, maybe better, versus, let's say, if you're the Big Ten, understanding who you are in the marketplace and saying, you know what, we'll let the other ones negotiate, sign their deals, 30 million per team in this conference, 46 million per team. And then we can say, well, we're rolling out our TV numbers and what Ohio State and Michigan, et cetera, on down the line have brought in, and we're worth, boom. And you can kind of bully your way in and say, but for the Pac-12 to allow all that to take place and all those TV spots and windows to be taken, knowing that they were in a bad position, instead of jumping in first and saying, let's get something so we know we're still in the game and we're relevant and we've got our territory.
There's one other thing I want to say about all of this. And, I did allude to this on a previous show and on a general level. I mentioned specifically that Kliavkoff and the Pac-12 should be thinking about Sunday afternoon football, and not every week. All right. But like when you look at the NFL schedule, there are a few weeks per season when the afternoon window is terrible. When you have like a Raiders Cardinals game and a Browns Chargers game in Los Angeles, and it's dead. That window is dead. Put a 2:30 game on there. And so the Pac-12 would be the only football entity on a October or November Sunday afternoon where football is being played in that hour segment from 7:30 Eastern until the NBC Sunday night game kicks off at 8:20, being the only show in town in that 50-minute window after the late NFL window ends. Like, I'm thinking that's pretty good real estate. And so if you flex your Pac-12 games so as to make your a limited Sunday package coincide with those dead NFL windows, when you don't have Cowboys Packers, when you don't have a high-end NFC East Fox game of the week, or you don't have Chiefs Bills on CBS in that late window, when you have those really mediocre NFL windows, like the Pac-12 needs to flex a game into that slot. And hopefully creative, fresh thinking, hopefully from a Pac-12 perspective. USC fans might not give a darn about the Pac-12 anymore now that they're leaving. But just speaking from the Pac-12's point of view, if that kind of fresh thinking is not happening, and we don't know, but like if things like that aren't being tried, George Kliavkoff is not doing his job properly right now.
Absolutely. And again, I know I'm not stating anything that Matt didn't, but I know from being a red zone guy watching the NFL games on Sunday afternoon that for us folks in the Eastern time zone, we're talking from that 3:15 to 4:15 window. So for all of you at 12:15 to 1:15 in the afternoon, that's when that first batch of games are in the fourth quarter. What is their catchphrase on the NFL Network? The bewitching hour. The bewitching hour. And it's phenomenal television. I love it. But just because of the geography of the league and because of where games are scheduled, usually that 4 o'clock window, sure, they may have a marquee game or two, but it's number one, it's just based on quantity. It's much thinner. And some weeks it is, I'm not, and I'll watch any NFL at any time, but at 7:30, you're finishing out Cardinals, Rams, and it's 37-12 halfway through the fourth quarter, and the other games Raiders, Seahawks, and it's 28-6, and it's like
last year, I live in Phoenix, so I saw my share of late window dog poop games. Yeah. I saw Cardinals Broncos with Trace McSorley against Brett Rippon. I really wanted a Pac-12 game instead of that.
Yeah.
And you will get that several late windows per season. So there's an opportunity there. Another thing that I haven't mentioned in previous weeks, Mark, on the Voice of College Football. One thing that I know that college football diehards always talk about, and Larry Scott never did this, but this was a discussion point for a little bit. Actually, Cal played, I believe it was Rice in Australia in a season opener several years ago. But what if the Pac-12 was part of a college football marathon? College basketball used to have this 24-hour marathon where you would have some mid-majors playing games at 5 a.m. in the East, overnight, students attending games in pajamas. If the Pac-12 could get a pajama football party at Oregon State, Washington State, play a game late at night, that would be part of something exciting, part of something fresh, part of something revolutionary. And you obviously don't waste those kinds of gimmicks on USC or Washington. Your prestige programs, you're always giving them the Cadillac treatment, prime time on Saturday or in the 3:30 window on Saturday. But for your Washington States, your Oregon States, that would seem to be a publicity splash and an opportunity to make a bigger national brand name for themselves. So there are things that can and should be explored. I don't know if they are being explored, but the Pac-12, it can't be traditional, same thing we've always done. The Pac-12 has to be looking for ways to freshen up its product and give TV and streaming outlets something that isn't conventionally found anywhere else. That is something that's always been part of the Pac-12 formula. We're in the West. We're in a time zone no one else is, no other Power 5 is. So let's play around with this and make use of it. And some people are going to laugh at how non-traditional and unlikely and improbable all these things are. If you're the Pac-12, though, if you don't have leverage, and we all agree the Pac-12 doesn't have leverage, well, you're just going to have to do things that separate you from the pack. You're going to have to do things that are risky and brave. You can't just be conservative and go into a shell and just try to run out the clock.
I just posted a link to a video that I produced maybe a month ago. So check it out. Just some suggestions I had for the Pac-12 in TV negotiations and in their TV schedule as well. All right. Great stuff from everyone here. We appreciate all of you being here. And as usual, we've got the most people in the chat at the end of the show. So what you need to do is just wait for this video to post, which should be just about automatic. And you can catch the portion that you missed. Again, as I noted earlier, these live streams will no longer be edited into repurposed videos. We will just simply timestamp it so you can go to the section that you want. But of course, you want to catch all 60 minutes, of course. But if you would like to go to a particular subject, you can do so. Matt, what's available on Trojans Wire this week?
So we're diving into a mix of different topics. I mean, the basketball team is in some preseason top 20s, the way too early preseason top 20s. So, like, if you're a basketball fan, USC's, really becoming a legitimate force, or at least is in position to be a legitimate force. But we're doing a mix of topics. Like, this is our off season, but of course, the spring game's just around the corner. So, the week before and the week immediately after, we're going to have a lot of spring game coverage. And then, of course, this coming Sunday, this next Trojan Conquest Live with Tim Prangley and Rick Anaya at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, it's going to be their last Sunday show before the spring game. So they're going to preview the spring game. I'm going to join them for a little bit. And then their show on Sunday, April 16th, will review the spring game. So next week with Trojans Conquest Live, and then our show, Mark, on Monday, next Monday, the 9th, at the Voice of College Football, or I should say the 10th, April 10th, Monday, April 10th. So Sunday the 9th with Tim and Rick, Monday the 10th here with you and me. It's going to be our USC spring game preview, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And again, everyone, we're going to pay tribute and honor Golden Blue Dude. That's in an hour over on the main channel. And we're just going to reminisce. That's all that's going to be. And we've got a GoFundMe set up for GBD and his family.
Wait. Okay. Just sorry to butt in there. But Tim's saying not Easter. No show on Easter Sunday. Is that what I'm hearing, Tim? And it's going to be on Saturday, the 8th, instead of Sunday the 9th.
Okay.
That's what I seem to be seeing in the chat.
Yes. So
Saturday at 8 p.m.
Okay.
Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Okay, good change up.
Absolutely.
So on Saturday the 8th, just this 1 week, much as we changed from our regular Monday night slot to Tuesday for the NCAA championship game. Okay, thanks, Tim.
Saturday. All right, folks. Join us in an hour over on the main channel, and be back here next. Oh my goodness! Now I got to keep it straight. Saturday night with Tim and Rick on Saturday night at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, I believe, is still going to be the time. And then Matt and I make it back here next Monday at 11 Eastern and 8 Pacific to preview the spring game. Appreciate everybody being here. Bring a friend or 2 or 50 with you next week, and we'll make it on back for Trojans Live.